The Ultimate Fighter Season 28 Heavy Hitters featured the winner from the Canary Islands. His name's Juan Espino, one of my favorite heavyweights to watch. The Ultimate Fighter Season 30 featured a heavyweight from Canada that hadn't won a fight since 2009 and was also 43 years old. And also these guys. We have Zac Pauga. The nickname's the Ripper. He's taken on the Motor. He's not from Detroit. It's Mohammed Usman, a guy who was a defensive lineman with Arizona. He was a 2-star recruit when I read about him at the University of Houston.
Makes sense. He is built like a brick shithouse.
But when you watch Mohammed Usman, very entertaining fighter. Now, I say this, he's the younger brother of Kamaru Usman. You might go, younger brother? Kamaru's a young guy. No, Kamaru's 35. Mohammed's 33. And if you look at it for Zac Pauga, he's 34. These guys are older heavyweights making their way downtown, getting a chance in the UFC. And listen, obviously heavyweights age differently. These guys both don't have extensive records. And for Zac Pauga, he started MMA as an amateur at the age of 30. So if you still have a dream out there, maybe you could do it. Now, he was like a heavyweight through his amateur days, undefeated, became a light heavyweight as a pro. He's not a big heavyweight, like he's like 230, 240. Mohammed Usman started off as a big heavyweight, and he's slimmed down as he's gone on the show. It's kind of weird.
And it's not like he slimmed down with fat. Like, he has kind of lost muscle. He almost doesn't really look like the same guy at this stage of his career. And it has made him a different fighter than the one that you might remember coming from the PFL, because physically, they don't really look that similar at all. And it has been a big transformation for Usman to get down. Now, I say get down to this size. The guy's 6'2" and weighs 240 pounds. But again, if you go back and watch some of his earlier fights, he did weigh in at basically the heavyweight limit, so it will be interesting to see how that does affect him and his movement at this weight class, because he is somebody who, even at his highest, he kind of fights like a guy who did other sports growing up. Like, Greg Hardy got decent at MMA basics because he is a really good athlete. Like, I don't care what your personal feelings are about Greg Hardy. If you play in the NFL, you are an extremely athletic human being. And Mohammed Usman is also an extremely athletic human being. But when you do have a background in another sport, when you've been focusing on trying to make a career in another sport, well, Fabricio Verdum never tried to be in the NFL. You know what he did? Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai until he became the heavyweight champion. So for Usman, you look at him and he is 33 years of age. It feels like his skill set belongs to a 24-year-old, though. Like, it feels like his skill set belongs to somebody who did have 10 fights in the regional scene. And now they're coming up at the Ultimate Fighter, so I'm very curious to see what adjustments Usman can make. Because I do like what you said, and it does make me kind of rethink this fight a little bit. In the heavyweight division, neither one of these guys are old by any means, but for Usman, at a certain point, I'm going to have to see some type of an evolution in his game.
And I didn't see much for either guy that I didn't see on the regional scene. And I watched a lot of regional tape, and then I just watched the Ultimate Fighter fights. And listen, when you had Usman against Michael Sipe, in that fight, Sipe had his name tattooed on his back. And he's, like, egging Usman on the whole fight. That's why he lost that fight. I know it's a unanimous decision. The only reason he lost is because he fought like an idiot. And Nunes was giving it to him. All the coaches were. But he'd, like, egg him on, and Usman drops him in the first round. And then the second round goes, and he's, like, still egging him on. Like, what are you doing, man? So Usman's able to get it done. He's the guy that fights behind, like, one jab and an overhand right. And that's it. Like, he'll throw the occasional leg kick, but it's a lot of single shots. And Pauga does kind of the same thing, and both of these guys, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, come out of bigger camps. For Mohammed Usman, it's Fortis MMA. For Zac Pauga, it's out of Elevation Fight Team. So both guys getting the opportunity to train with good coaches and good training partners. And when I look at it, the fight against Eduardo Perez for Usman, Usman was the advancing party that tended to land more shots. And that was pretty much the story of that fight. I know it's a split decision win, but that's what I gathered from it. If you look at the rest of the Usman fights from the regional scene, I went back and watched this fight against Dontel Mays. Usman tried to wrestle Mays, and he had success there. And when it was at distance, Mays landed combinations. When he fought Frank Tate, he did relatively the same thing. Garcia knocks out. Reggie Cato, he just closed the distance, throws a right hand, and ends up hurting him. And against Brandon Sales, he was on the channel here, did an interview, and then he caught the Fight Night Picks curse, and he ended up losing to Brandon Sales, who was supposed to fight Greg Hardy on Dana White's Contender Series, but it fell out. But when I look at Usman, a lot of single shots. When I look at Zac Pauga, I expected, okay, the guy, young in his career, young in his MMA career, he's coming out of a bigger gym. He fought a decent level of competition. He beat Maluko, so that's fun. Beat him over at Cage Warriors 130. So I watched the fight, and I went, okay, you beat Marcus Perez, that's really good. Marcus Perez missed weight by, 4.5 pounds? He weighed 210.5. And in that fight, Perez wins the first round handily, completely out-wrestles Zac Pauga. Second round, it's kind of 50-50. Third round, Perez doesn't really have a whole lot left. Pauga is the fresher fighter. Pauga's fight against Bartling on The Ultimate Fighter. A lot of single shots, a lot of jab to the body, come up with a right leg kick, and then his fight against Heiderman, pretty well the same thing until he lands and finishes him.
But what I do like out of Pauga is that at least his shots are straight. There is something on the in-between when it's not just a knockout. So that is one thing he has going for him. The one positive I will give Mohammed Usman is he moves extremely well for a guy his size. Like, his footwork on the feet, it might not be dynamic in a sense like Max Holloway where you're trying to circle your opponent and get the edge on them that way, but just his left to right and even backing up, he's a lot faster than the majority of heavyweights at this stage. So if he does get in trouble on the feet, I do feel like his athleticism and his movement is going to be able to help him at least work through some of those bad positions. But that is the big thing that stood out to me between these two athletes, is the movement of Usman, to where maybe he can use some of his movement to make Zac walk into a big shot, but for Pauga, I really do like his jab to the body. I do like some of those steadying shots. They're not necessarily the most damaging shots in the world, but they're things that are going to get your numbers up, which do matter. They're going to resonate in the eyes of the judges, which does matter. And they're going to set up your own power shots, which is going to be very important for this fight. Because if Usman does just try to use his footwork and his overhand right, he's probably going to be whiffing at air quite a bit. Now, if one of those shots lands, it is probably going to be over. This guy does have incredible power when he is able to land his shots, but the problem is, it's like Deontay Wilder earlier on in his boxing career. He had a great right hand, but he wasn't good at landing it. He didn't really have a jab, didn't have a left hook or anything around it. Mohammed Usman just has that right hand right now, and he's going to have to build other parts of his game to help accentuate that one weapon.
The thing that weirds me out about this one, if you look at Zac Pauga, and Forrest Griffin even said it in one of his fights on Contender Series, he was like, wow, that's a good finish. It was his last one. He's like, that's a good finish. This guy normally fights to a decision. And if you look at Zac Pauga fights, if every fight was 15 rounds, he'd knock guys out in like the 14th round. He'd just tire them out because Pauga actually does move well on the outside. He gets backed up a lot. He gets held up against the cage. He doesn't have great takedown defense. Whereas Mohammed Usman, when he finishes his fights, it's usually earlier on in those fights. So it is an interesting matchup. I thought, numbers on a page, stats-wise, I take Pauga 9 times out of 10. I'm not really there anymore. So if I do look at the odds, Pauga open to minus 200, minus 238 right now. For Mohammed Usman, open plus 170, around a plus 200. We have a look at the Tapology votes, Matt. Surprise to us there to you. I'm going to say if Pauga's that big of a favorite, I'll say over under 70%.
I'll say over.
Though again, there's the Usman name. It is over. So 983 total votes, 80% Pauga, 69% by decision, 22% by knockout. For the 20% that have Usman, 45% by decision, 42% by knockout. You seem to have tipped your hand earlier, but I'm eager to see, are you going with Zac Pauga to win this fight?
Do you know what my big issue is with Mohammed Usman being on The Ultimate Fighter?
I have a big issue with everybody in this season.
Why are they making the brother of the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world fighting on The Ultimate Fighter? Ayman Zahabi just got to fight in the UFC because he's related to Firas Zahabi. My point is, if you are this top-tier prospect or the
Coming
UFC...
off a loss, that's it.
But still, if you're... people have fought for titles coming off losses, so I'm not too concerned about that. If you are this good of a fighter, and you do have the relationship with your brother, and that's something that the UFC can promote, they normally wouldn't make you fight on a reality TV show to then prove that you belong to be in the organization. If the UFC doesn't even believe in Mohammed Usman to give him the opportunity out the gate, I have a hard time picking him to actually make it to that level. I think the winner of this fight is going to have a tough time at the UFC level, just because Zac Pauga is a small heavyweight, and Mohammed Usman is a big athletic heavyweight who relies almost too much on his own athleticism to then grow in just sort of a skill capacity. So I am ever so slightly going to pick Pauga, but I gotta be honest, I was really excited about Ricky Tercios, for instance, coming off last season. I know he hasn't necessarily worked out, but still, the hype was there at least going into the finale. I can't say I feel that kind of excitement or hype for either one of these athletes.
Yeah, I don't watch The Ultimate Fighter as it's going on. I'm not a big TV guy, let alone reality TV guy, and so you're really going to have a hard time getting me involved in the show. So forget about the drama, forget about the storylines. He got here on his own volition, winning those 2 fights on the Ultimate Fighter, so we end up in this finale, and I think Mohammed Usman has a wrestling advantage. So for that reason, I'm going to pick him to beat Zac Pauga, but both of these guys are low-volume heavyweights. The worst kind of heavyweights. The worst result... This fight wouldn't even be on Dana White's Contender Series. They wouldn't get a contract. Mick Maynard and Hunter Campbell wouldn't just sign him up because they know what's going to happen. It's not going to be the greatest of fights. So, listen, fool me once, can't get fooled again. I've got Mohammed Usman as an underdog in this one. Matt going with Zac Pauga, the Ripper. Let us know who you have in this matchup. I'm really eager because there's some diehard Ultimate Fighter fans out there, and they hit up the comment section. I want to hear from them. Who do you have in this matchup? Jeff Neal's taking on Vicente Luque next in the co-main event. Thiago Santos, Jamal Hill in the main event. It should be a great one. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.